Welcome to In the Funnel. My name is Mark Cox. In the Funnel is a group of sales coaches and consultants that help B2B sales teams dramatically improve revenue. Clients come to us when revenue growth is stagnated, or their sales team is not meeting expectations, or they need to recalibrate their sales and go-to-market plan for the upcoming year. Our clients have enjoyed tremendous success working within the funnel, and please hear it straight from them by listening to the testimonial section of this website. What they'll tell you is there's two things that make us unique and different in our space. Number one, we have a process and a methodology. First, for understanding your current state, and then second, for building your sales and go-to-market plan for the upcoming year. The second thing that makes us unique and different is that everybody within the funnel has run a material sales organization in their recent past. We're all practitioners. We don't have any theorists or teachers, and what that means is we can get in front of your sales team and run the next sales meeting, or join them on their next sales call to close your next large prospect. All of us have a passion for professional, disciplined, process-driven sales, and we'd be delighted to talk to you if you're looking to grow revenue for your company. Please feel free to reach out to us through this website at info@inthefunnel.com or by telephone. Thanks for taking the time to watch this.
If women aren't applying, why is that? Wouldn't you kind of scratch your head and go, oh, maybe we should look at our wording and our, there's a lot to be said for shortening the requirements, because the conversation about how men will apply if they feel like they meet 60% of and women want to meet the whole thing. Now, I don't think that women want to hit 100%. So if they don't meet 100% of what you're looking for, some women won't apply. And often we have way too many things. We have 50 bullet points. And that's another bit of research that's been done, that if you have more than 2/3 of the page as bullet points, you'll get less women applying. So, because again, there's so many things. And so if you shorten it, and then you say in your LinkedIn, when you share it on LinkedIn or wherever you share it, you say, even if you don't meet all the bullet points, even if you don't meet every criteria, please apply. We want to talk to you. And that will help you get more women.
So David, really exciting one today. We got Lori Richardson on, and I'll talk about Lori in a sec, but this is the first time we've had two people interview one of our guests.
Yeah, I'm super excited to be here, Mark, for sure. I mean, I love your show, and I'm glad that I got a chance to be here today.
Well, David, hey, thanks for joining, first of all. And it was your idea, which I think is great, but really we're always just trying to figure out ways of making these podcasts more helpful to folks who want to learn and continue to develop. And you've always had such great perspective on this that I just thought would be great to experiment with a few of these and see how it goes. What are you hoping is going to come out of today's discussion?
Well, I think that particularly when you told me that Lori was coming on, I was really excited because, I mean, I manage a group of mostly male sales reps, and we've been making a conscious effort to try to have some more diversity on our team. And I think that so far it's gone pretty well, but I think it could get a lot better. And I think that the perspective that Lori is going to share with us is pretty exciting.
Well, you know what, David, thanks for that. And folks, just so you know, Lori Richardson is a sales influencer, and according to LinkedIn, Salesforce, and other organizations, she's one of the top influencers out there in professional sales. She's the author of She Sells: Attract, Promote, and Retain Great Women in Sales. And she hosts her own award-winning podcast, Conversations with Women in Sales. She's also the creator of the She Sells Summit. And she's got a great background that she's going to share. Lots of great things to talk about here. I should also mention that she's the founder and CEO of Score More Sales, a sales enablement firm helping SaaS, tech, manufacturing, distribution, and services companies solve sales issues and grow more. Now, David, you're coming back here after a little travel away, right after a vacation.
Yeah, I went to Disney.
I was working last week. You weren't working.
Yeah.
So I'll just bring that up. So don't feel guilty. I guess even though I'm doing all the work, you get a 10, you look good, all those things, good for you.
Oh yeah, Mark, I was in Disney with the family, and Disney is like one of these, marketing machine, amazing place from a business
No
perspective.
kidding.
But yeah, I'm back, I took the week off. I did, a little, trying to recover from the pandemic, like a lot of us, right? And,
Yeah.
one of the interesting articles I read when I was out, Mark, was this whole thing on this quiet quitting and this movement that's happening with some of these young people. And I'm looking at it, and I wanted to make sure I asked you this, if you heard anything about this, and what can managers like myself do to, first of all, address it and try to make sure that we get ahead of this, to make sure that, it doesn't affect our performance?
Well, you know what? I think it's a really interesting one. I remember even pre-pandemic hearing some stats out of Deloitte about the number of people working in companies that were disengaged, which means they stopped caring and all of those things. And then there's a level even below that called actively disengaged, where literally the definition is they hope bad things happen to the company. So they stay employed. So you think of that, think of the logic. Bad things happen to the company, I'm going to get paid less, I'll have a lower bonus. They don't care. They're actively disengaged. And I think all of these things continue to roll up to management and thinking about, how do we create an environment where it's psychologically safe so people can feel comfortable working there, but they're challenged. It's not too easy. They're well coached and they're learning and developing professionally. They're excited. It's in some ways, I think that's so easy, frankly. And I think in other ways it's difficult. But I think a lot of managers, and particularly sales managers, get in their own way. And so I think it's all we can do as leaders is set really good stretch goals, then enable the team to achieve them with proper guidance and direction, proper training, and then get away from micromanagement and let them go at it and try and build an environment that people want to be a part of. It's like being part of any team, in sports teams when you grew up. Sometimes you loved being part of that team and you do anything for the team. Sometimes you're playing with a lot of talented people, but you certainly wouldn't have wanted to go for a beer with them.
I hear you, Mark, and that goes back to diversity, right? And to a certain extent, like I found the best teams that I were a part of, everybody brought something different to the table.
For sure.
And this is this whole thing that we're talking about with Lori today, which is building on that diversity. So I'm curious, if I'm here today, but out there in the world, the other managers, CEOs, everybody else that's listening, what do you think they could get out of listening to something like this today?
Well, just play with the simple math. Let's just even start with just gender diversity. And that's a lot of today's topic with Lori, gender diversity, women in sales. I think at the core, let's just play with simple math. I want the best people on my team. And am I going to go to a market that has 10 people or 20 people if I want the best person? I'd rather have a market of 20 people to pick the best person. My odds of finding a top tier player increase. So I think what's kind of great about the chat we're going to have with Lori is we need that coaching and counsel as to how do we make our company attractive to everyone across the spectrum, that they want to participate. So, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of gender, everybody wants to be on this team. All it means is mathematically, I'm going to have a much better team because I have a broader group to pick from to find the best people. And then I also think there's that balance of different perspectives help for collaboration and growth. I want somebody else's perspective. I already got mine. I've had mine for too long. So I want somebody else's. So that's where I think the real opportunity is here, David. There's a lot of, as the stats will tell us, a lot of industries are underrepresented by women today, and it doesn't make any sense. And it's not enabling them to run the best business they can run. And that's what we're all trying to do.
Absolutely. For sure. Well, I'm looking forward to hear what Lori has to say about this for sure.
Me too. It's going to be a great conversation. And by the way, You're new here. Who are you?
Yeah, so my name is David Fauser, and I've been in sales my whole life. I mean, I remember being a kid, and my dad was in business, and he would always say, "You're going to be a great sales guy one day." Now, I'm not sure if I'm a great sales guy today, but he certainly, was one of the rare people that was encouraging his son to get into sales, and I really thank him for that. I mean, my other option was a police officer, Mark, and that's what I thought I wanted to do, but he started taking me around and stuff like that. So I've been in sales forever. And I love it. And there's nothing better for me than, being involved in some of these deals. I'm fortunate, very, very fortunate to manage a team of people. And I'm always looking to make myself better and make our team better and learn what else is out there. And I think that this podcast in particular is a fantastic podcast for sales leaders and salespeople to gain those other perspectives. So the fact that I'm here with you today is a real pleasure.
Well, it's a real honor on our side, and thanks for joining, David. And it's that growth orientation on someone who's reached your level and been as successful as you, but still just this crazy appetite to continue learning. Really, that's what we're hoping everybody in sales has. Certainly what I have. It's really why I love this podcast so much, because of what we're about to learn from someone like Lori, or what I'm about to learn from you. So, hey, thanks for joining today. And here's Lori Richardson, everybody. Hey, Lori, thank you so much for joining the Selling Well podcast. It's a real pleasure to have you here today.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. Great to see you both.
And gang, I'm joined by my associate, David Fauser, and we're really excited about today's topic because there's a couple of things that are really exciting. Based on the intro we've given to Lori, we're absolutely going to talk about women in sales, and how it's not just ethically the right thing to do, but from a business performance perspective, it's just the smart thing to do. And there's some interesting research on that we're going to point to, stuff that's recently been published in Gardner and HBR, amongst other things. But maybe, Lori, one of the nice ways to start this might be, could you share a little bit of the short story about your amazing journey in professional sales?
I'm glad you said the short version. That's great. I could spend the whole time just telling you about this, but I grew up in a family-run business. My grandmother had a women's clothing store, a fine women's clothing store, upscale. Okay. And that was in Seattle when I was young. And a comparable quality would be Nordstrom, which was very young back then and not all over the country. But it was very upscale. And so I learned how to sell kind of subconsciously, not being told what I was doing. I just watched her in action. And there were so many great things that I gained from that. And then I went on to become a teacher, a preschool teacher. Then I got married, became a mom, and then I got divorced. And that all happened very quickly. So in my 20s, I realized that I couldn't support a family on my teacher's pay, which I don't know what that's like in Canada, but in the States, this is what people have been fighting for in the last year or two, is for decent wages. I made minimum wage caring for people's children, which is really sad. And I thought maybe I could sell something technology wise, because tech was really booming back then. And I will date myself when I tell you this was the early 80s. And so I ended up going into selling computers, like the first Apple computers, the Macintosh. Wow. I sold thousands of them, and I sold thousands and thousands of IBM computers. And there was a computer made by a company called Compaq, which was acquired. And the luggable, you could actually lug it around for 30 or 35 pounds. And I sold software that was in a box. Right. And I had large customers. I sold millions of dollars worth of technology to different clients, and including a little airplane company based in Seattle, and some big banks. And so there were a lot. It changed me so much from being a very low wage person to really being the sky's the limit. And I never looked back. And so I did that for about 16 years. And then I launched my own sales consultancy.
What an interesting story. By the way, my brother's a teacher. He went on to being a principal and a bunch of things. And David's wife's a teacher.
Right. She is a teacher.
Great.
Yeah.
Gotta love teachers. It's such a tough job.
For sure.
Well, you know what?
Sorry, Lori, talking about your story in your early days, that would have been a very sort of male-centric sort of role back then. What was that like, being a woman coming into that environment?
It's really interesting because my first job, and I applied everywhere. There were a lot of computer stores back then, retail stores, like there was Business Land and Computer Land. And I don't know if any of this is familiar, but the company I ended up going to, we actually had a great mix of men and women in my first role. And no one really talked about being female or male. We were all young, and it was a wide open marketplace, and people were, putting money down to get a deposit in so that they could who couldn't make products fast enough. And so It was really great, but it was the next company I went to where they had never hired a woman in field sales, and I had to jump through 100 hoops, and ultimately they did not stand behind me. And I ended up, after making them a lot of money, I ended up going to a competitor because they were not supportive of me, and it was very difficult. So I'm just glad I got off on the right foot and didn't start with the other company first, because I might not have stayed in it.
Well, we're not that different in age, Lori. And people always smile when I tell them this, but my first job in sales was in technology. But in the early 90s, one of the major technologies out there was literally those photocopiers that were half the size of a room.
Oh, yeah.
Because the commercial browser was 96, right? So there wasn't a lot of other technology.
Yeah.
And in the Kodaks and the Xerox and the Canons of the world, there was gender diversity, at least within my limited sphere. David and I were talking a lot about this, when we were prepping yesterday and today for the discussion. And I look back on, maybe I've got a very rose-colored sort of history in terms of sales, but of the 3 best managers I ever had, one of them was a woman, and she was spectacular. She sold originally for a computer company called DEC when you were selling with against
Equipment Corporation.
Yeah.
I sold their computers.
She was great, and she had a background with Xerox, and she was spectacular. Karen Holmes, wherever you are, thank you so much for your coaching. And
I was just going to say, back in the 90s, there were companies that were forced to hire women because of government contracts in the US anyway. And so a lot of women like Jill Conrath, if you ever hear her story, she got hired because they needed women on their team. And so the big enterprise companies were better at it. It was a lot of the small ones. And then leading up until even, 2015 was when I looked around a room. I was going to do some training with some managers and realized that nearly the whole room was male, and it wasn't a complex sale. It wasn't technically savvy. It was just very basic stuff. And I thought, this is a boys' club. Where are the women? The women are not here.
Well, by the way, Joe Conrad, the Xerox also.
Yeah, that's right.
Back in those days, that's how you got your ticket stamped in sales. Instead of taking it in college or university, you went to IBM or Xerox or Kodak.
Right.
Once you got through, I remember this vividly, once you completed their 90-day training program, before you'd sold anything in the market, if you'd been through the training program and made it, headhunters were all over you.
Yeah.
So the companies that didn't invest in training would try and pull you out.
Right.
But it does lead, Lori, when I think back to those days, and I certainly haven't had my eyes as open potentially as you have for the last 15 years. How do you see the state of women in professional sales today? What is that situation?
Well, I think we were making some pretty good progress through 2019 or so. When I think about 2017, 18, 19, we were really kind of building momentum. A lot of companies were putting in new policies. They're changing their approach. They were listening to those of us that were telling them how to better hire and how to retain and how to change the wording on their websites and get the 4 white, bald male founders off of the, if you
Can I
have all
take
male.
can I take offense
No
to the bald
offense.
comment at that point in time? So those on the podcast,
Okay,
2 of the 3 people in this podcast have hair and one of them doesn't. And we'll leave it to your research to figure that out.
I will even say for young male founders, which people think is really cool to get your picture up on the website. But when your entire board is male and white, and so is your founders, you don't need to put them all on your website. Just, do something about it, or get some people in. It's not about hiding what you have, but and I know we're going to talk about this, but the fact that, get some diversity in your group there, especially in leadership, because we know that when leadership changes, when there are more women in leadership, that revenues go up. So,
well, it makes all the sense in the world. And, David had been circulating some research from Gardner saying at a leadership level, only about 19% of sales leaders are women. I think that was 2019, was it not, David? Does that resonate? Lori, do you have any more updated?
Yeah, what I was going to finish is that because of the pandemic, it's really skewed our numbers and we've lost women. And I've seen Mary Shea, who, was a researcher, and she's now at Outreach. And she's comparing 2 different studies that she's seen where women are represented 10% less. And so I'm not sure what the exact number is, but we know that women are underrepresented at every level in nearly every B2B sales environment. Not all, but there's only a couple that don't have that problem. Sometimes us former teachers go into ed tech, and so ed tech happens to be one of the niches where there are more women represented. Companies that are selling any kind of marketing services have a lot of former marketers, which tend to be women. Pharmaceuticals, they hired women for a different reason, but that tends to be more distributed from a gender standpoint. But just about everything else, I mean, even wine. Somebody told me the cheese industry. I just heard all these different things are still very male majority.
It's interesting, Lori. A few months ago, I was challenged by one of our employees here about a representation of females to males, and my response was, well, they don't apply for the job, so what do you want me to do? And I feel embarrassed that I said that at this time, because she said back to me, well, what are you doing to make it more comfortable for them to apply so they could feel safe, and it sort of hit me right between the eyes. And as a father of a daughter, I've got a mother, I've got a wife, I've got a sister. I never really saw myself as having those biases, but when I peeled the onion back, they were there in a sense, right? They were hidden, and I didn't recognize that.
Yeah.
Do you find that to be maybe one of the issues that's happening here?
Absolutely. I think it's really easy for us to put it on the women, like, well, if they wanted to, they'd apply, right? But I have case studies where I've talked with founders of companies where we talk to them about just trying a little harder, trying some different approaches, and them ending up bringing women on who just blew it out in terms of performance and just, killed it, as they say. And that isn't always the case. I mean, I always say not everyone is good in sales, whether they're male or female. I'm not going to stand here and say that women are better, although a lot of people tell me that. But my thing is, if we're as good, why aren't there 50% women in the different roles as well as leadership? Why aren't 50% of leaders women? I just don't get it. It's very much it's a couple things. One is that women were raised not to be as pushy and as aggressive as men. So we're not going to say, I want your job. And so when I get in as a sales rep, I'm not going to say, what does it take to be a leader around here? And yet we know men that do that in the first week or second week. And it's not, they're not looked at, looked down upon. Like, women are like, oh man, she's pretty aggressive. Boy, she really wants to take the place over. And then just a societal thing is that, business was built by men, sales was built by men. It was an all-male profession for a long time. And as women get more into it, we don't have great role models. We don't have a lot of success stories to really share. I mean, there's a lot more now than there used to be. So I'm very hopeful. And a lot of women don't even know that there's a career called B2B sales. I've talked to women at college level, even high school, who had no idea what this is. And I think it's a well-kept secret that you guys have had for a long time.
Actually, on that one, I would push and say, I think that's universal for whether it's, young men or young women.
True.
I think, and I always love Dan Pink's, To Sell Is Human book. I think that should be required reading at the college and university level. But, there's always that discussion these days, with David, with his 2 young kids, would he want them to go into a professional sales career, if they're 11 and 13? Is this what he hopes for them?
Right.
Or does he hope something else? Let's take him out of the fact that he's a sales leader and all of that. Would he have hoped for those things? And I can certainly say that I don't think my parents, had any idea, but this was not what they hoped I would have been doing for a living.
Yeah.
And or even, being an entrepreneur. That, it was the corporate world.
And the funny thing is that a lot of women and men, and I would say men too, but lots of women, most women will say that they just stumbled into sales, that they never intended it. I intentionally went in because I wanted to make money to support my family. And I thought, what could I sell? Technology. That's where, that's where it's at. That's where the future is. And so I intentionally made that move. And but most people just kind of stumble into it. A lot of women would go into marketing, and that's because they could get a degree in it. And now we know, because I'm on the advisory board for the Sales Education Foundation, that there are hundreds of sales programs now where you can not only get you can get master's degrees, you can get a PhD in sales, and definitely a bachelor's degree. And there are a lot of amazing programs like UT Dallas. I know there's some across Canada as well.
Well, even in the UK, Philip Squire, you might have read his great book. He's a great thought leader like yourself in the UK, but he called out the inconsistency that there's a formal profession in purchasing in the UK with, certification and qualification and ongoing training, but there was nothing in sales, and he started it. So there's a couple of universities in the UK, you get a formal certification as a professional. I might have that term wrong.
Yeah, they're probably listed. They might be part of Sales Education Foundation. Look.
You talked about, lack of role models, but of course you and the women in sales and the different groups that you're part of, you're all changing that. We've had maybe 10 of those folks on the podcast, the Tiffany Bovas, Lisa Magnuson, Lee Hansen, Alice Hyman, also a teacher. She used to be a teacher. Right. Wendy Weiss, Diane Helbig, just fantastic.
Yeah.
I don't know if Tiffany Bova from Salesforce is part of that group or not, but she's
not, but she's a good colleague of mine. I have the utmost respect. I love her book. If anyone hasn't read her book,
great book.
Fantastic. Yeah.
I love the way that book is written.
Yeah, I like the pictures.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I'm not so good with words. I'm pretty good with pictures. But so let's circle back to the why. So I think there's this, ethical, socially conscious component of this doesn't make sense. Half of college graduates or university graduates are women. By the way, I will note, if I could throw this out really quickly, we had Frank Cespedes from Harvard on the show a few weeks back, and I was chatting with him in Boston. It had always perplexed me that nobody in an MBA program wanted to go into sales. At least, when I had a close line of sight into it. And I asked him about that today, and he said 15 years ago, his sales courses were empty. But he said now, because everyone wants to go into entrepreneurship and they want to do a startup, everybody in biz school gets that selling is super important because they want to get their startup off the ground. So just on the education front, when you're saying women want a degree or a course, I think there's momentum at the university level with MBAs and so forth. But Frank thinks a lot of that's being driven by the fact that MBA students still want to go into consulting and they want to go into investment banking, but a third of them want to start companies and they know they need sales skills. So
Yeah.
whether that's women or men. But
Yes.
Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, it's interesting you say that because they polled alumni at Harvard and they said, the MBA students said the biggest thing they were missing was sales knowledge. And Mark Roberge, who used to be at HubSpot,
Yeah.
he teaches at Harvard now. He teaches an entrepreneurial class, and some of us have gone in as sales coaches and worked with the students. So there is a class now for MBA students, which is fantastic.
And how was that, by the way? What was that experience like when you're in front of MBA students? Do they get it? Were they keen?
Yeah, most do. I think the first year, I've done it 3 years, and the first year was kind of like, oh, my girlfriend said I needed to take this, needed to go to this session. And so there were a couple of people that didn't quite catch on, but yeah, no matter what you do, you're going to sell your ideas, you're going to sell something. And those that were open-minded were very, very good. We've done a lot of work back and forth and had different modules where you could see progress. And I loved it. I really loved it. And looking forward to the this upcoming year in the spring, we'll be doing it again.
Well, along the same kind of path as Harvard, there was an interesting article published in HBA, and maybe you saw it, which was why women are the future of B2B sales. Did you see this one?
Yeah, apparently we're not the present, but
oh
no, I'm just being smart. But yes, absolutely. That was familiar, very similar to a lot of the things a lot of us are saying, but it's like when Dan Pink writes it or when Harvard published it, everybody pays attention, and that's good. So totally agree with that article and the stats in it as well.
Yeah, there were a couple of stats that I thought, because it was that I thought were a little off, to be honest with you.
Yeah, which one?
They were talking about the percentage of people who hit quota. And so it was a study by incentive solution provider Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And it said that 86% of women achieved quota compared to 78% of men. Both those numbers seem super high to me. So not comparatively to each other, just the percentage of people hitting quota. That one seemed a bit high. And I think it was on a survey of about 500 salespeople.
Yeah, which isn't a big sample. It's not a very big sample, but Exactly has done some gender surveying in sales. They've done a couple of different surveys, and I don't know if their later one, they did one, I think in 2019, and I'm not sure, I can't remember when that came out, if it was 2019 or 18 or when it was.
This one was actually 2020.
Oh, okay. So they had their latest numbers. We all know that lots of reps don't hit quota. Probably not even 50%, right?
That one just seemed a bit high to me. Did it seem a bit high to you, David?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I'd be pretty happy with those stats, actually. But
yeah, right.
But it's interesting, going back to a comment you made earlier, Lori, about this whole, this article talks about males tend to be more aggressive, and then your story about being in front of the room and all male sales leaders. Mm-hmm. What do you think it is that prevents maybe women from being a little bit more assertive in this area? And what do you think really, or is that the reason why, do you think? I mean, that's the one thing I took from this article, that because they're more collaborative, as it states, right? So I would be really curious to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I did some research with Dr. Joel Laban, who is at Johns Hopkins University. He used to be at University of Houston, where that's when we did our research. And we just found that, women approach things differently. It's not right or wrong. And that would mean, so therefore it would mean women should be onboarded differently. Women should be looked at differently, or we need to change it all so that it fits for everyone. I don't think you should have two tracks, one for women and one for men necessarily, but women have a different approach, like you were saying. Like, instead of making 100 cold calls, I could make a smaller amount of LinkedIn connections and build relationships that way. Now, when people first started doing that, it was highly frowned upon, right? That, you got to make the cold calls, you got to pick up the phone and try to reach people. Well, it's a much different story now when people don't answer their phone anymore, isn't it? And so building relationships and how to build relationships and having empathy and listening and really hearing what people say, or sensing, like, I don't think this is a good time. Is it a good time? Because I will feel that when I walk in a room, and some men do too, but not all men do that. And more women do. So I don't like the, one or the other, women are this, men are that. There's a lot of blend. And even with titles now, we know that, people aren't even sticking with just a male or female title. So I'm just saying it's different. Mm-hmm. And if it's different, sales has always been, well, this is the way my manager taught me. This is the way I did it. I was good in sales, so I got promoted. I'm your manager. You do it the way I do it. And for, the past, I think it sometimes worked, not always. But now that doesn't work anymore.
That is one of the major problems in sales, in my view, that the people in leadership are telling folks to do exactly what to do, and nobody wants to be told what to do.
Right.
And by the way, the world keeps changing. And so what I did may not work anymore if I was good at this 5 years ago or 7 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think the other huge issue is right now in professional sales, frankly, is no one gets coached anymore. Yeah. At the beginning of this podcast, I talked about a number of women. My first boss in professional sales was a woman. She was fantastic. Then about my third boss, professional saleswoman, she's one of the best bosses I ever had. This is Karen from DEC. But those women had time to coach me as somebody with energy and enthusiasm and drive, but I needed guidance. I needed coaching.
Yeah.
There's no coaching anymore. Nobody has time for coaching with a quarterly cadence.
I mean, we want managers to coach 50% of the time of their time, and people laugh at that.
Well, by the way, Michael Bungay Stanier, I bet he's been on your podcast. See the stats in the coaching habit in terms of what percentage of people actually coach?
Oh, and it's so low. Yeah.
And then the percentage of folks who see value in the coaching.
Yeah.
It's even scarier.
Yeah.
As we wind off of this Harvard article, the one thing I really liked, there's 2 points that I kind of took away. And I'm so glad, by the way, Lori, we had this topic.
Yeah.
Because first of all, they talked about these 7 capabilities of high-performing salespeople.
Yeah.
Based on their analysis, they'd identified a few that women were better at, a couple that men were better at, and a couple that seemed to be kind of a push, that they were equal. But when I think of the ones the women are better at, connecting, collaborating, and shaping outcomes, it's to me, the connecting, collaborating, that's what's missing in professional sales.
David's laughing.
I couldn't agree with Mark more on this. I mean, I saw that and I was like, yeah, this is dead on. Like, this is what the future looks like, right? So, well, it's what the present looks like, as you would say, Lori. This is what we need today, right? And we're just not good enough at it.
So David said, I'm sorry, go ahead, Lori.
This is my motto.
There you go.
More women, more sales.
For me, even if for those listening, and, Lori, we got a lot of CEOs listening to this and sales leaders of mid-sized organizations, or even sales leaders, like David, of very, very large sales organizations, north of 100 or 150 people. It's just playing the odds. I want the best person on my team. So am I going to source it from 50% of the population who might be interested, or 100%? It's just basic math. My chances of finding a superstar go way up if everybody wants to be on my team and we have a diverse team, so I have all the talent to choose from,
Yeah.
I pick the 3 best out of 100 instead of the 3 best out of 40.
And as David says, if women aren't applying, why is that? When you kind of scratch your head and go, oh, maybe we should look at our wording and there's a lot to be said for shortening the requirements, because the conversation about how men will apply if they feel like they meet 60% of and women want to meet the whole thing. Now, I don't think that women want to hit 100%. So if they don't meet 100% of what you're looking for, some women won't apply. And often we have way too many things. We have 50 bullet points. And that's another bit of research that's been done, that if you have more than 2/3 of the page as bullet points, you'll get less women applying. So, because again, there's so many things. And so if you shorten it, and then you say in your LinkedIn, when you share it on LinkedIn or wherever you share it, you say, even if you don't meet all the bullet points, even if you don't meet every criteria, please apply. We want to talk to you. And that will help you get more women.
There's a great tip. And I guess there's a whole bunch more of those tips, Lori, coming in. She sells, attract, promote, and retain great women in sales. So your upcoming book, by the way, by the time this gets published 2 weeks from now, your book will just be live.
Yeah.
What other great tips do you have in there for us to attract, promote, and retain great women in sales?
Yeah, we have tips at every step of the way to find, attract, hire, onboard, promote, retain. It's one thing just to bring women in and say, oh, we have 20% women, we have 30% women, but what are you doing to retain them? And women in general are more interested in what kind of professional development they can get. They want to know if the company has strong ethics and morals, more than men, not all, but just in general. That's something that is more interesting. We know women are less of risk takers than men, so that can balance things out in the leadership department. And so, we want good companies that care about, the environment, about people, and about our employees. And so those are things that are important for people to know. So what are you doing towards those causes, or what are you doing for employees for maternity, parental leave benefits? All those things are factored in when women go to your websites and look at the jobs open.
And if we're a young woman today in a biz school or going through college or university, and we want to learn more, we want to actually understand the art of the possible in professional sales, what resources or where should we go to learn about that?
Well, I love that, because back in 2015, 2016, there was only women sales pros. And now what I realized during the pandemic, I noticed there were about a dozen different groups and communities focused on helping get more women into sales and sales leadership. And so I've shared those, and you can find information about them at Women Sales Pros on our blog, and also at the She Sells Summit website. We're always sharing, podcasts about sales that are hosted or co-hosted by women, books that are written about sales that are written by women or co-written by women, because typically people will put some of the same old names out there about what a great book that is. And, there are some good sales books. And I have a lot of colleagues who are men who have written sales books, but they're not all the books. And I say that these books, this whole list I have that are written by women, they're not necessarily better, but they're different. And so it makes really, there are authors like Colleen Francis and the books that Jill Conrath has done, and Amy Franco, and Anita Nielsen, Beat the Bots, and there's just so many great books that are out there that it's a shame if people just focus on the ones that they keep seeing in a list on LinkedIn somewhere.
Well, I think we're probably up to podcast number 50 here with the Selling Well. And I think, 90% of the folks on, including yourself, are all authors. So there's lots of great new books. And I've got to ask, if this is your first book, what was the process like? And tell me about writing this one.
Yeah, it's not my first book. I used to publish books on this platform called Lulu, where you could just kind of put it together. And then I printed books and workbooks, and I would sell them at speaking engagements, and I would incorporate them in coaching programs. So I've done a half a dozen of those. But this book did take research and, input. And I actually had to totally rewrite it when the pandemic hit because the premise was different. And then as we were coming out of the pandemic, I didn't have it finished, and then I had to modify it some more. So it's been a labor of love, as they say. And, just a bit of it's when you run a busy sales practice, it's hard I can't just escape to the mountains, for 3 months and get it written and finished. So it took a lot longer than planned.
I can't tell you how happy I am to hear that, because I'm going through the exact same process. And today is no different. I wake up every day beating myself up because we also run a sales practice that's very, very robust. And, it's not Lulu, but there's something called Scribe now.
Yeah.
And so we're doing Scribe, and I got 35,000 words, and I probably need another 100 hours to finish this thing. And it shouldn't be this hard. And I've never procrastinated at anything like I'm procrastinating with this. It's quite shocking.
I feel like it'll happen when it happens, because you learn new things every day. Mm-hmm. What I know today is very different than what I started on the journey. And the goal I don't think is just to put out a book. The goal for me was to learn. I've been trying to learn, why is it that we can't get more women into sales? Like, everybody gets it. People act like they understand, but then they don't do what they need to do to make it happen. And so it's been very interesting just learning from different industries and different people about why people know something, but they don't do it. I feel like it's been a journey for me, and it happens when it happens,
Is that, is it at all equivalent, Lori or David, I think the three of us know there's been some ongoing challenges in professional sales for a long time. And, the fact we pitch instead of really understanding who we're reaching out to, we talk too much, we don't ask enough questions, we don't qualify opportunities. The person on the other end of the line or the meeting can tell that our intent is really not to help them, but it's to help ourselves. Wouldn't you say the exact same thing, frankly, Lori, about a good majority of professional sales today? There's some fundamentals that they're just not getting.
Yeah, and I think I've been around the SaaS world quite a bit, and it's ramped up so quickly. And those entry-level roles, the SDR, BDR, most companies don't train people well in those roles. And they're the ones that are the face of the company when they're reaching out to you. And that's really hurt the industry for sure. And when email stopped working, I don't think it works that well. It's very noisy, and now LinkedIn is noisy, and you really have to go back to the basics and see what worked. And it's about building relationships and finding ways to stand out and be different and understand what the buyer really wants.
And what are you seeing, David? You have so many people underneath you, and you're such a large team that you work with. Is any of this resonating with you in terms of what you're seeing in the field?
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. I mean, we have to do a better job on board. Everything moves so quickly, and as well too, Mark, the other side of it, even with a good coaching program, on the other side, you have to have an open-minded individual who's willing to to learn. I mean, still, I think like this whole idea earlier, you're talking about this professional purchasing. Still, it's like sales. I heard a conversation today, for example, that we want to hire somebody new, no sales experience, no technical experience. And they said, well, I mean, whatever, it's just sales. He can learn it when he gets here, was a sort of thing, right? And I was like, no, that's not it. That's not it at all, right? So it for sure resonates with me, for sure. I'm curious, Lori, for another question that's just been on my mind, and I want to ask you. In your book, I'm excited to actually read it from She Sells. And is that like, as for me as like a manager, a male, I have no idea what it's like to be a woman. I really don't. And I have no idea what it's like to come into an organization that's mostly a male environment. Are there some good helpful tips in there for somebody in my situation, as somebody that's running a sales team and wants to have some more diversity?
Yeah, I wrote the book for men in sales leadership and company leadership. Women can certainly read it, and women in sales who are in sales roles will relate to it. Although I don't know if it'll do much for them, other than they might want to give it to one of the leaders that they know. But it's because of all the questions that I've been asked over and over about hiring and retention. And so we just put it together to hopefully answer those questions. So I hope that you will find it helpful, for sure.
I can't wait to read it also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I was also really curious too, like, one of the other with women, but there's also diversity as well too. And the one thing I was excited, and I asked Mark if I could join on this one, was I really want to hear what diversity means to you. Like, what is your perception, or what, if I was asking, like, if I want to build a diverse workforce, what does that look like to you, and from your perspective?
Yeah. So David, I'm glad you asked that. We talk about an acronym DEIB, which would be diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And diversity is just the first step. It's like, oh, they told me I had to hire women for my sales team. I've worked with companies where there were people that literally did not want to do that. There were managers that said, well, we can't go to the bar on Friday now. Is that, or whatever. So people have resisted. I've heard HR people say, if you hire these women, you have to keep them. They have to stay on your team. You can't just let them go. And so all sorts of crazy issues. But hiring is just one step. Is my voice heard? Am I an important part of the team? Do you care about what I think? Do I get talked over in meetings? These are things that do happen to women, not all the time. And we've worked really hard to teach women to speak up as well. Simply to say, David, I'm still speaking. And so it's not all the environment, but it's a two-way street. But if I don't feel comfortable, why would I want to stay at your company? That's the bottom line. And so women do leave and go to other companies where they feel more welcomed, more included. A manager might come to them. For example, I know of a really great senior manager who has done really great things with diversity. He has a very inclusive sales team, and yet he'll still go to the women on the team and say, did I say that right? And he'll check with them and not just assume, well, I did my part, I'm this great guy. But they'll keep going back to say, what could I have done? How could we do even better next time? And that's what good servant leaders do, male or female. So to me, it's about the belonging part and the inclusiveness. If I can look at my team and it represents different cultures and different ideas, we're going to accomplish more. And there are sales team, there are buying teams that will turn you down if you're not diverse enough anymore. At least here in the States, they'll say, we didn't see anybody look like us. You're not reflecting who we are, and we think we went with someone else because of that. That happens.
Boy, I think that this is such an important topic. We'll continue on this one for sure.
Great.
And by the way, I'm just so glad, one of the reasons we run this podcast, Lori, is because we want to learn.
Yeah.
Like, that's what we get out of running this podcast. And we're hoping that the folks listening grab nuggets that they can steal and use and leverage to run better businesses and better sales teams. And boy, I'm convinced that they would have picked things up here today.
Yeah, Mark, I took 6 pages of notes here.
Holy geez.
Yes, I know. So
Holy
But that's why I love
anybody-
our profession, because we're not doctors. We don't have to act like we know everything. It's a human business. We deal with humans, the business is changing. We all want to improve. And that's why I love salespeople and sales professionals.
Yeah, me too. How do the folks listening today learn more about you and the Women in Sales Pros and the conference? I was checking out some of those great keynotes that you've got on the website.
Yeah.
Where do we go to find all those things?
Yeah, there's some great recorded content there. So I would say connect on LinkedIn, connect with me on LinkedIn, or find me at womensalespros.com. I'm on Twitter and Instagram. And the She Sells Summit, it's shesellsummit.com, has some great recorded content and more to come. We have our next event in January. So very excited about that. And you can find all the different women in sales groups through Women Sales Pros website.
And by the way, She Sells, attract, promote, and retain great women in sales. The link to that book, by the time we publish this podcast, it'll be in the show notes, so you can buy it on Amazon. And this is a silly question, I'm sure, but of course, men can join the She Sells Summit, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're in an echo chamber unless we have men supporting us, because men have the power in business and in sales today, and we need your help and support, and to keep talking about this at every sales conference and every event that we can until we get there.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Hey, Lori, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah,
It's been
keep
a
up
real-
the good work, Lori. Thank you very much for doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
A great conversation with Lori, Dave?
Oh, it was. I mean, like I said on the podcast, I literally took 6 pages of notes, Mark, and I think I got some really useful things out of it.
So as a leader of an industry which is male dominated, your whole industry is kind of male dominated, industrial refrigeration. When you look at those notes, what are some of the things you might try and take away and apply?
Well, I mean, for sure, it's like when she talks about the way that you go about with the job description, like having that limited bullet points.
Yeah.
And then also putting in there, so you don't have to meet all of these things. And try to make it, again, that's just a little tip to make it feel safe for someone to apply. I mean, that story that I tell earlier about, well, they don't apply, what do you want me to do? Well, this is what I should be doing. I think that what we were able to do here was we've taken up maybe 7 or 8% of our sales force now is women over the past year. And I'm already seeing some huge advantages of what they're bringing to the table from a different perspective. And I think that's a good thing. So, but before that, I don't think I would have recognized, Mark. I mean, that's the biggest thing, is this whole thing about the biases. And I just don't think I would have recognized this was a problem until somebody actually challenged me on it.
Well, when you talk about these things like a bias, and folks out there, if you want to be scared, read Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, which talk about all the biases. And there's about 135 biases that we all default to, where we blind ourselves to the truth because of a bias. And there's so many of them. It's a bit of a difficult to read this book, but it's so obvious you get caught in these biases once you spot the ones that you fall into. And I think this is just another great one. There's certain things that happen in professional sales that really are curious to me. Just doesn't make any sense to me at all. And one of the ones never made sense to me was the fact that professional sales wasn't taught in the college or university level en masse. It just doesn't make any sense. But this one doesn't either. My limited experience, Dave, as I mentioned in the podcast, I've just had nothing but a spectacular experience with, high performing women in sales. Some of the best peers that I've had that I was competitive with and challenged by, they were amazing. A couple of the best bosses I had, including my first boss in professional sales. I ended up having a lot of bosses who kind of grew up through the Xerox training back in the day and all that. And that was very good training, or IBM training. So just great bosses. And I really like today's conversation with Lori because it's just so inherently factual and logical. And so for me, that's how I end up processing things. I tend to be emotional, but just facts and logic makes just so much sense. And so many good, simple tips, like thinking about my website. How many pictures of women, or the women on our team do we have on my website? Or is it, as she put it, a whole bunch of bald white guys like me? So, which was hilarious when she said that, but kind of true. I think my picture's all over our website, and it's not like it's attractive. So I'm not really sure why there's so many pictures of my shiny red head. But really important kind of topic and conversation. And I think these are the things we need to be talking about. We need to understand. And for me, it makes so much sense. I'd love to see how we think about getting more young people interested in a career in professional sales right out of college and university. And I'd love it to adhere to the split between men and women in college and university, which these days there's more women graduating college and university than men. I think it's like just over 50% are women.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, Mark, if we could get more trained salespeople to enter in, we can teach them the other parts of the business, but
yeah,
it's like one of those things, and we've had several conversations about it in regards to just taking that sales profession seriously to a certain extent. But
yeah.
I'll tell you, we get a lot of salespeople from a sales training program, and their level, they just hit the ground running so much faster because they paid to get that training.
Yeah.
They took it on their own. So there is certainly a difference between a trained salesperson versus somebody who's just learning.
Night and day. I love the example you used again today in the podcast where you talked about someone saying they'll learn sales.
Yeah.
They're good. They're good on the technology side. They'll learn sales. Spoiler alert. No, they won't. No, they won't. We'll be back in this conversation 8 months from now. Hey, David, I got to call it out. It was great to have company interviewing somebody today.
Yeah. No, thanks, Mark. It was really, really fun, and I really enjoyed it. And I would love to be on this anytime you're doing something. It really is interesting. And I think, just on this topic, I thought about my daughter the whole time, right? And
of course, yeah.
And that I talked about to you all the time about how she just has all of the skills for being a salesperson. and she thinks of things that I never would have thought about. And she's got this Girl Guide story where she went to the door with 2 boxes because she said, well, they're going to buy 1, they're going to buy 2. And
nice.
I never would have thought of that. But it's interesting, Mark, and I wish I would have brought this up with Lori, but all of a sudden, I talk about her in that light, and then it's amazing how many negative comments I get. Well, hey, sales isn't for her. She can do something better. And, and I think, sales in general or women in sales. And if she hears that from a young age, what's the chances of her actually following up on this career choice? Probably pretty slim. And Lori's story about what if she got into that second company first? She wouldn't be in sales right now. She wouldn't have accomplished everything she accomplished.
Right. Where it was a much less inclusive environment.
It is. So I think there's I think it's quite a layered subject, Mark. I think it's layered, and I think there's a lot of stuff there, and it's something for us to think about for sure as people that are, anybody in a leadership position. What can we do differently? And I think the thing is what Lori inspired me about today was there's a lot we can do.
Yeah.
There's a lot that we can do. So I think being here today and having the ability to converse with that, I think this is really a fantastic thing.
That's a great takeaway, man. There is a lot we can do, and it's not splitting the atom. I mean, this is absolutely actionable, and it's the right thing to do because it's, socially and ethically, it's the right thing to do from a social conscience perspective. And then from a business performance perspective, unquestionably in my mind, it is absolutely 100% the right thing to do. You want to have a better sales team? Make sure that it's gender diverse and diverse. And then once you have these different perspectives, make sure there's an environment where collaboration occurs, because we'll be better. So collaboration cannot hurt. It's impossible for you to be worse off with collaboration. So it's this fundamental truth. Hey, David, looking forward to having you join for the next one. Thank you so much, sir. And for everybody who's toughed it out and listening right now, I just want to say thank you all for listening. As always, we're running this podcast so we can actually provide tips, processes, strategies, ideas that help all of you run better businesses and better sales teams right now. And we know we can get better at this. So first of all, thank you for listening. If you did enjoy today, please do like and subscribe to the Selling Well podcast. That really matters for us. And thank you for doing that. Tell your friends. And if there's something you didn't like or somewhere we can improve, tell us. Send me an email, markcox@inthefunnel.com. I love constructive criticism. Send me an email. I check that email and tell us how we can get better. David joined us today because, again, as I said, a listener said to us, hey, why don't you have 2 people interviewing somebody? So we're trying it out. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll see you next time on The Selling Well.